Hello students, a very warm welcome to Verical's Learning Vlogs. This is CA Prince George and today we are going to study a very interesting section, that is section 194C of the Income Tax Act 1961. And the reason why I picked up this section is because during my corporate career I realized that operationally this is perhaps one of the most encountered and debated sections within the community of accountants. But surprisingly, at the same time, it is one of the most misunderstood and enigmatic sections for them. And in today's video, I am not going to discuss the entire section. Most of it is quite self-explanatory. I'll be focusing only on some key issues which has plagued this section for a very long time and has been subject matter of litigations and subjective interpretation. So let me begin by giving a brief overview of this section. This section basically requires certain specified person to deduct TDS when they are making payment to a resident contractor. And the specified person also includes individuals and HUF. However, they are required to deduct TDS only when their turnover from business is more than 1 crore or their turnover from profession is more than 50 lakhs. Otherwise, they are not required to deduct any TDS. Similarly, where they are making any payment to the contractor for their personal purpose. For example, if they are building a bungalow for them and for that they are making payment to the contractor, they are not required to deduct any TDS under this section. Now, with that, let me just come straight to the key issues. Now, key issues lie in the language of the section. The section says that where any payment is made to a resident contractor for carrying out any work in pursuance of a contract. Now, let me pick the last phrase first. This phrase, in pursuance of a contract, it doesn't really have any interpretation issue in tax jurisprudence. It is quite well understood within the community of tax practitioners and also in the judiciary. However, I have found that accountants often misunderstand this phrase to mean that wherever there is a contract, they have to deduct TDS under section 194C. But that is not how you understand this language. This phrase simply means that the payment should be in pursuance, the work should be carried out in pursuance of a contract. The payment should be made in pursuance of a contract and not gratuitously. This is all what it intends to mean. Now, so I just wanted to dispel that notion. That's it. Now let me come to the main issues here. The main issues lie in the understanding of the term contractor and the phrase any work. So when the section says when a payment is made to a resident contractor for carrying out any work. Now, how do you interpret the term contractor and the phrase any work? Does this mean that, for example, if a company has hired a person to run its canteen and the company is paying the person a retainer amount of 1 lakh rupee every month, and on the other hand the same company is paying a lawyer a retainer fee of 1 lakh per month for managing its legal affairs. Now both the cases, two different individuals are getting 1 lakh rupee paid every month. Are you going to put both of them on the same footing? Do in the general parlance we call both of them as contractors? The person who is running the canteen, of course we call them a contractor, a canteen contractor, But will you call the lawyer also a contractor? Is this how the term contractor understood in the general parlance, or is there some legal meaning to it? Does the Indian Contract Act define a contractor? Well, no, it doesn't define who a contractor is. It only defines a promisor and a promisee. So what do you mean by a contractor? Because it will have an implication on how to what extent do we extend the meaning of the term contractor and any work. Similarly, in case of the phrase any work, how do you understand any work? Does that mean you make a payment to a cobbler, or say a massage parlor, or a high-end hair salon, a teacher, a coaching class, a karate instructor? Does any work include all of them? A doctor, a lawyer in absence of 194J? Does these professional services can also get included in this within the ambit of section 194C, because it is saying any work? Now there is a judgment by the Supreme Court in the year pronounced in the year 1993. It was in case of Associated Cement Company Limited versus CIT. Was reported in ITR number 201 in page number 435. And the Supreme Court ruled here that any work indeed means any work, and cannot be restricted to works contract as was usually understood till the time of this judgment. So does that mean whatever I just mentioned, the list that I gave, a cobbler, a massage parlor, a high-end hair salon, a teacher, karate instructor, all of them will be counted into this section? So let me try to explain this by looking into this from three different angles. One is, let us see if we go strictly by the dictionary meaning, how would we interpret the term contractor and the phrase any work. Then we will see what is the socio-political background in which this section was introduced. So what was the original intent of the legislature? What was that evil that the legislature wanted to curb, because of which this section was introduced in the year 1972. And thirdly, we will see how this whole section and its interpretation has evolved, and how do we interpret it now. Now it is important to see this holistically and understand it comprehensively from all these angles, because even today, when we feel that most of the issues are settled, it probably is not really settled, because there are still many new businesses, new types of businesses which are coming in, and which might also lead to different kinds of situations that we have not encountered in the past. So holistically understanding this section from all the three angles is important. So let me first start by understanding how does dictionary defines the term contractor and the phrase any work. So I'll just read it for you from the dictionary itself. Now the dictionary meaning of the term work is any activity such as a job that a person uses physical or mental effort to do, usually for money. So according to the dictionary, of work means actually indeed any work, because it is saying any activity. And it doesn't matter to what extent one is putting the mental effort or physical effort, what is the intellectual level which is required to carry out that work, whether it is a work of a cobbler or a lawyer, all that doesn't matter. A work is a work according to the dictionary meaning, and which is usually done for money. And it also doesn't matter to what extent are you applying your physical efforts. Correct? So basically, going strictly by the dictionary meaning, as I said, all the ones that I had listed will get included in the term any work. So any work would include work done by a cobbler, work done by a mason, work done by a civil contractor, a work done by a teacher, a coach, everybody. So you really don't need 194J, a doctor or accountant, if you go strictly by the dictionary meaning. Now let us see how is a contractor defined in the dictionaries. So it says that a contractor is someone who enters into a binding agreement to perform a specific task or provide a service for another party, often in legal or business contexts. So all that is required for a person to become a contractor, as per the dictionary, is a binding agreement to perform a specific task. When the company in my example engaged the lawyer, it did engage the lawyer in pursuance of a contract. There was a contract between them, a retainer contract. So going by this definition, the lawyer becomes a contractor. Like the canteen manager in my example, he is also on a retainer basis. So he is also a contractor. Both of them are on the same footing as far as the dictionary meaning are concerned, and they can be called as a contractor. So going by the dictionary meaning, you really do not need a separate section 194J, because work would include anything. And we will come to, once again we will revisit what the judgment of Supreme Court in Associated Cement Company Limited versus CIT really meant when it said any work means any work and cannot be restricted to just works contract. Now let us come to the second angle which I mentioned about, to look into this issue, and that is what was the socio-political environment in which this section was introduced by the legislature. Now back in 1970s, the country was facing challenges and issues with respect to tax evasion, rampant tax evasion, and proliferation of black money in the economy. And to find out why exactly was this happening, they had constituted a committee under the leadership chairmanship of the then Chief Justice Wanchoo, which the committee was popularly known as the Wanchoo Committee on tax evasion and proliferation of black money. And the report was popularly called as the Black Money Report. Now, Justice Wanchoo and his team, after doing their study, they found that the main reason for evasion of tax and proliferation of black money was the contracting sector. And by contracting sector, they meant the sector that takes contracts from the government, big contracts from the government, to construct building, to construct roads, infrastructure, dams. They take huge railway contracts, including contracts for labor. So many of these contractors were big companies like back then Godrej or Tata, and they would give subcontract to other individual or non-individual contractors, subcontractors, and most of it was done in cash, all of this. And this, according to the committee's report findings, where the predominant reasons for evasion of tax and proliferation of black money in the economy. So they gave their findings to the government. So in the findings, contractors had a specified meaning, specified understanding. They did not mean when the government is, for example, hiring a lawyer, or anybody is hiring a lawyer or a chartered accountant, that is not what they meant. They had a specified connotation by the term contractor. And when they said contracting sector, this has to be then be understood in the normal parlance. When we say contract, whenever we say contractor, the guy is working as a contractor. We never assume in our mind that the person would be a chartered accountant or a lawyer or some kind of a professional or a spa manager. There is a specified understanding that the person is taking works contract, is into works contract. There is some element of material involved, some element of labor, low-end labor involved here. So that is how we understand contractor when we use in our common parlance. Now immediately in the upcoming finance bill of 1972, a new section was introduced because of the suggestions of Wanchoo committee, which was section 194C. And the language of 194C back then was exactly the same. The main language was exactly the same as I just read out, wherein it also said that where any payment is made to a resident contractor for carrying out any work, including work of supply of labor, in pursuance of a contract. So the language, the core language still remains the same as was originally introduced in the section in 194C back then in 1972. Now when this section came to deliberation in the parliament, there were there were many parliamentarians, including one from Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Anandam, who had raised concerns with respect to the open-ended language of the section. And Mr. Anandam in the deliberation said that the use of the term any work is ambiguous and can lead to mean or lead to include also services rendered by professionals like doctors, engineers and chartered accountants and lawyers, whereas the intent of the government is to only consider the contracting sector, the contractors who are engaged in works contract. So in the parliament, it is all recorded. You can actually go back and Google the original parliamentary debate and find all this, that what I am saying now. And they also, there was another, I don't remember exactly the name of the parliamentarian. That parliamentarian also raised objection with respect to the minimum amount which was suggested back then. The minimum amount which was suggested was 5,000 rupee. Now, by the standards of 1972, 5,000 was a very, very big number. But still, the parliamentarians considered in the deliberation this amount to be very small. This again suggests that the intention was to include only the contracting sector, works contract, and they knew that works contract actually ran into crores and crores. And one of the parliament also mentioned that if you are restricting this only to 5,000, then there are ample chances that professionals like doctor, engineers and chartered accountants might also fall within this ambit. And the intention was not to include them in the ambit, but because of the open-ended language of the section, that is any work, they might also get pulled into the section. However, the government continued with the same language, and as was feared by many, it actually triggered a lot of litigations, lot of debates because of this open-ended language. And the debates and the litigations went on for many years. Finally, in the year 1993, as I said, the landmark judgment of Associated Cement Company Limited versus CIT came, and this judgment, because it ruled that any work means any work and cannot be restricted to just works contract. This judgment emboldened the CBDT, the department, and immediately after this judgment, they released a circular number 681, which was dated 8th of March 1994. In point number 8 of this circular, CBDT clarified that because of this judgment, now payments made to professionals like doctors and lawyers and chartered accountants and architects, engineers will also fall within the ambit of section 194C. So that was the repercussion of that judgment, because now the department had the power of this judgment to back them for their point of view. However, this did not go very well with the tax professional fraternity, and a petition was filed in the Mumbai High Court by the Tax Practitioners Association, and the Mumbai High Court ruled in favor of the Tax Practitioners Association, and it clearly laid down the difference between payment made between services of professionals and services as is envisaged in 190, as the work as is envisaged in 194C. And it said that in case of professional services, there is a clear difference in the intellectual level of work which is required to be done, and a certain professional course to be undertaken, without which one cannot qualify to be a professional, and which is in stark difference with what somebody like a labor does, somebody like a canteen manager does, a canteen contractor does. And it also clarified the judgment of in case of Supreme Court judgment in case of Associated Cement Company Limited versus CIT, and said that the judgment, even though Supreme Court mentioned that any work means any work and cannot be restricted to works contract alone, however, the judgment needs to be seen in the light of the facts of that case. The question before the Supreme Court was never whether professional services are also a part of extended meaning of any work. That was never a question before the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court did not address to that issue. just because it said that any work cannot be restricted to works contract doesn't mean everything can get included there. So professional services, they ruled out, will be included, and hence the circular was considered to be a void circular, considered to be to not have a legal standing. And of course the department went and filed a special leave petition in the Supreme Court, which again upheld the judgment of Mumbai High Court, and hence after this professional fee was not included in section 194C. However, the executive intent had to prevail at some point. So subsequently in the year 1995, a change was brought in and section by the legislature, and section 194J was introduced because they had to finally tax professionals somehow. So 194J was introduced and they continued taxing the professionals. So now as far as 194C is concerned, professionals doesn't get taxed there. Now there is another issue which still remained in section 194C, which was where any work is being carried out by the contractor. However, the product which is an outcome of that work, what if that product is transferred to the customer and it results in a sale? For example, where there is a customer who gives a contract to a manufacturer, and the requirement is that with a certain specification that manufacturer has to manufacture that product. The specification is given by the customer. Now the manufacturer uses his material and does the manufacturing of that product. Now when the contractor, the manufacturer, is transferring this material after it is done, this product, to the customer, will not this transaction tantamount to sale of goods and not works contract? Because by way of that transfer, a transfer of title is also happening. The title of that material was never with the customer. So even though the customer would want to call it a works contract, but actually it is not a works contract because there is a transfer of title of material happening at this stage. So this issue still plagued the section as to whether this is then a transaction of sale or whether this is a transaction of works contract. Though for many tax practitioners it was quite an well understood situation that wherever there is a transfer of wherever there is a transfer of title happening, it is actually a transfer, it is actually a case of a sale and not a works contract. So where the person is using, the contractor is using the material which is supplied by the customer himself, then that is a case of works contract, because the title of that material has never passed on to the customer for sale to happen in the first place at any stage. However, when the contractor is using his own material, then the necessity of transfer of title is there to transfer the when the goods are being transferred to the customer. So this was in the minds of the tax practitioner, it was quite a settled issue. However, the legislature made certain amendments in the definition of work which is provided in section 194C, and just reinforced this understanding by saying that where works will include material or manufacturing or supply of any goods which are manufactured or supplied by using the material which is purchased from the customer by the contractor. So where it is purchased by the contractor from the customer himself, then it will be a case of works contract and will fall within the definition of work. As a result, TDS will be deducted by the customer. So now it is a settled issue. However, I just want to end this video by leaving a thought in your mind. The language of this amendment says that work includes manufacture or supply of goods where goods are manufactured or supplied by using material purchased by the contractor from the customer. They are not saying material provided by the customer to the contractor. So when the contractor has purchased the material from the customer, the title of that material is already transferred to the contractor. Now after working on it, once the finished goods is done and manufactured, when the contractor is transferring this finished goods to the customer, that transfer legally cannot happen unless and until the title has also been transferred, and the title can be transferred only when a sale is executed between the contractor and the customer. So that becomes a transaction of sale and not a works contract because of the use of words purchased and not provided in the section. So that is my understanding. This is just a thought for you to think about it, and let me know on the comments what do you think about it. Thank you so much.